but like, let's just say we take one of our top laundry suppliers and we meet with them and we're going to go through a business.
Is it still in the same tiny cubicle? Because that's 2 in a box is sweaty. I don't know.
No, it's not the same. We call it a meeting room, maybe, but it's got to be more than that.
You're listening to the Middlemen Podcast with me, Tom Lemongello, and my co-host Todd Zawicki. Our careers have put us in the middle between retail, media, and brands. But retail media is a closed loop, so we're here to open up the channel and let you listen in. Join our discussions with the people who make retail media happen. All right. Hey, Todd. How's your week going?
Excellent. It is, we're post-Halloween, and which means we're post-daylight savings time expired, and I'm very much on perma-daylight savings, living in the northwest corner of the country where we go from having the sunset after 6 p.m. to now before 5 p.m. And so the idea of these people who are like, oh, we should be permanent standard time. No, because in the summer, the flip side of that is if we had standard time, first light would be 3 a.m.
Oh, man.
Here in Seattle. So we're like, let's delay sunrise as much as possible. People are like, oh, kids don't want to go to school in the dark. And like literally there's schools that have to start at like 10 a.m. for it not to be in the dark.
Perspective
in Seattle.
is important.
Yeah, I think fundamentally we have to the problem is I understand if you live in Southern California or the Southeast, you've got this, you have a different wind. We really need 4 time zones: the Northwest, Northeast, Southeast, Southwest. Those should be the time zones, right? They're different.
I think that sets us up very good for this discussion with Bobby Watts of Ahold Delhaize Retail Media US. The reason I say that is because they specifically have a real stronghold in the Northeast. So the retail chain includes Stop and Shop, Hannaford, Food Lion. It was
Food Lion's actually a Mid-Atlantic Southeast chain.
Yeah, so they're dipping down into your old neck of the woods.
North Carolina, Georgia, they're big.
Yeah, but the buildup of all this was buying Peapod and taking a big stake in Fresh Direct. And so there's a lot in this discussion because basically Bobby Watts has been doing this really since any inkling of retail media ever existed, and really before then as well. So he is a longtime operator in the retail world and really has embraced retail media from every stage.
His background is kind of akin to, we should post a link to our discussion with Keith from formerly of Best Buy, very analogous, right? Where they came from traditional retail operations side of the business and then migrated to digital and retail media. And, Bobby's story is really fascinating because he's gone through the entire journey where they started with an outsourced provider like Criteo, and then they moved to the staff augmentation kind of white label structure of Epsilon, and now through
they went to Quotient, then to Epsilon.
Quotient, then Epsilon. They did back to back because Quotient went under or got sold off into pieces, but they were part of that. Right, then they used Epsilon. Now, as a part, Ahold Delhaize has acquired an ad tech platform so they basically in-housed the development, and so they have their own. And for people who aren't familiar, Ahold Delhaize is actually a European-based operation, expanded into the U.S. And so to what you said, they've acquired all these chains that you're more familiar with. You're not as familiar probably with Ahold Delhaize. You're often more familiar with the region.
Yeah, Delhaize in Belgium, Albert Heijn in Holland.
They're in Romania. They're like all over Europe. They're
Proli in Romania. Yeah, I mean, but what's interesting is a lot of times they lead the market on a lot of in-store technology. That's the reason why when they launch Edge in January, they're going to have in-store as part of it.
Edge is the retail media platform, or what they're calling it here in the U.S.
Yeah, and I think the big headline is they are in-housing their on-site ad serving and attaching both the in-store capability and their consumer intelligence and planning. So, this is a really big step. Like the only other ones that do this are Amazon and Walmart.
And Target to an extent I think does this too, right? But you get into like Orange Apron Media from Home Depot. They're using outsourced platforms. They're licensing platforms like the Kevels of the world is an example in that space. And so, and Bobby talks about this, like the decision they made and why they made it and their evolution. So for those of you who are at the beginning of your retail media journey from a retailer standpoint and thinking through the different stages of what that evolution might look like from a product and tech and service provider perspective, this is, I think, going to be an interesting listen for what the lessons Bobby saw along the way and why the decision they made, right? And the decision they made is non-trivial. He talks about 60 to 70 people are staffing this product
Yep.
platform. And, they went to it eyes wide open. But Ahold Delhaize, given the European basis, is one of the largest grocery store operators in the world. So
That's why I attempted to call him the Intercontinental Champion. I don't know if we caught that, but yeah,
he missed
I think
your WWE reference. So he will
yeah. Well,
definitely bring him to a wrestling type
but
championship.
I would say, like, the last thing I want to say, I looked at the old way we were working when we were working with Ahold as Quotient. We were using audiences like they were 6 months to 2 years old, and he's really looking to move.
Because, by the way, to first
Yeah,
perspective, that's
yeah,
you were often involved in loyalty programs, and that was sort of the data that you guys were pulling from,
yeah,
and it wasn't real time. It was processed. On it took a while. So the idea of getting lists out of these retail media loyalty programs, it would take a while. So that's why they were 6 months to 2 years old. Which, as a media guy, is like, what? No way. Like, we people bitch in the media business if audiences are 7 days old, let alone 6 months. Like, that's a non-starter. So it's interesting to see this evolution of where retail media, its origins in these loyalty programs where the data was really out of date, to can they move to a world where it's not just real time, but even maybe predictive
yeah,
audiences as well.
yeah. So great discussion, long discussion. So buckle up and enjoy. Hello, welcome to the Middlemen. We are here with Bobby Watts of AD Retail Media US. Did I get that right? I've gotten that wrong in the past. Ahold Delhaize is a company that started in Europe, but has a huge presence in the Northeast in the US. And also, we're big fans of the original Peapod e-commerce capability. We wanted to hear from you. Tell us about your long history. You've been there since what, 2008?
So I've been with Ahold Delhaize in some form or fashion for a little over 30 years, actually. So it's
Wow.
been quite a journey working with them through a number of different pieces of my career, through operations, category management, merchandising planning. As you mentioned, worked in the Chicago office with Peapod Digital Labs with our ecom business, and then more recently, for the last several years, leading our retail media practice.
My first touch with you guys was working a little bit with Mark Williamson when he was part of your business. I was at Quotient and we were trying to do everything for you. So we were running your offsite media. We tried to bring sponsored search. We acquired a company quickly in Europe and brought it over, presented it to you. And then the pandemic hit and things actually went pretty well from that perspective. Things grew really fast. Tell me about the beginnings of retail media for Ahold Delhaize. What was it like to work in that pandemic era?
Well, I mean, as you said, Tom, like we were mainly outsourced pretty much everything through third party relationship with Quotient. They managed everything soup to nuts pre-pandemic. Even before Quotient, we had partnered with Criteo from a platform standpoint. And so we've been around the block a bit, but it was all, as I said, mostly outsourced and handled through a third party. It was really about the time, I guess it was 2020. So right when we were really coming in the thick of the pandemic, where we made the decision to stand up our own retail media network. And that's where we went out and said, hey, we want a different model than a fully outsourced third party model. And that's when we started to, I won't say the right way to maybe say, like we kind of decided to transition away from Quotient. We partnered with Publicis and Epsilon and CitrusAd at the time to help us on a journey of building out a retail media network. And that came in the form of technology, but also staff augmentation as well. And so then that was kind of the beginning of the journey of really standing up what I called that's when we got serious about standing up a retail media network at that point in time in about 2020, 2021. And then more recently, as you know, as we spoke at Grocery Shop, we're now embarking on even taking another step in the journey where we've built our own in-house ad tech and continuing to build out our own in-house network and moving away from staff augmentation and all that stuff's going away.
What I think is fascinating is that you are a rare bird in that you've covered the entire journey from completely outsourced to platform plus augmentation to now in-housing. And I like that's a journey I think other people are beginning to go
Mm-hmm.
down. And so what are some of the, recalling back, what were some of the decision factors to go away from Criteo and Quotient to Epsilon, and then now Epsilon to your own, you guys acquired a company or building out and wholly owned, like walk us through that decision tree of, A led to B and then B led to C, and now we're moving
Yeah.
on to the next thing. And I think that's a good, helpful guideline to other, especially as companies are now getting into the space. And Epsilon's popularity is growing as an entry point, but I think your journey is a great one to reflect on, and some of the things you learned and what led you to make the decisions to evolve.
Yeah, I mean, Todd, I think for first it started around speed, right? So we knew that there was an opportunity to have a retail media network and have our first party data and our customers to
Yep.
be able to, engage with advertising with our CPG partners and do that in a really compelling way. But we knew, like, in order to do that ourselves and build out an in-house, that would take a considerable amount of time. It would take years, quite honestly, is what we knew. And so
Yep.
we said, well, how can we move quickly? And that led us down the path with the Criteos and the Quotients at the time. And so,
Yep.
but then once we got to a level of maturity, and also I'd say the industry got to a level of maturity to say, well, wait a minute, we can do this in a different model where, I mean, we already have the relationships with the CPGs. We have direct relationships.
Yep.
We weren't as strong in the agency world as the Quotients and others were. They had those agency contacts and agency relationships, but that came, and then also, by the way, Tom, you said it, around the pandemic and e-commerce exploded, and so all of our our web traffic and our e-commerce business matured, right. And so we were like, wait a minute, we've got something here that we should be taking more ownership of versus being solely reliant on a third party to manage that for us. But again, speed is always top of mind. In retail, everything moves at such a fast pace. We knew that we didn't have years to kind of build out our own team before we could really get serious about a retail media network.
Yep.
And so that was the key deciding factor around, okay, well, so how can we move at the proper speed, stand up a network, have something that's viable to be in the market. And so that's when we made the decision to say we want to stand up our own retail media practice and network, but we're not going to build our own ad tech. We're not going to be able to go out and hire 60 to 70 humans from a talent perspective to stand up a team. But we need to take more ownership, and we need to, if we aspire to get there, you got to start with the first step. And so that was kind of our decision at the time to move away from Quotient, to move to Publicis, Epsilon, and CitrusAd. Yep. Was to take that step. And so that would say that speed was the factor. And then as we got into it, Todd, we said, hey, like, this is fantastic, but yet we still don't fully own it. And in fact, like, I'll be super transparent, like with my internal team, there was always a bit of, as much as we tried to have this one team mentality, there was always still an us, them. There was the staff augmentation folks, and then there was the internal AD USA badged folks. And we worked really well together. I don't want to paint a bad picture. We worked really, really well together. Right. But there was always still this underlying kind of, Epsilon, CitrusAd, Publicis agenda with some folks and leadership and having conversations within our team. And we knew that wasn't allowing us to advance our capabilities the way we wanted to. It wasn't allowing us to have the conversations with our advertising partners the way we wanted to. And by the way, that was our ambition from day one. We had told Publicis from day one, this is the staff augmentation model, and everything is a temporary relationship. We aspire to take full ownership. And so we started working with them on a multi-year plan to say, okay, how do we gradually tempt to perm associates or either, hunt and resource our own? And again, it all boiled down to having, the right pacing and speed in which to do that, having the full ownership so that we could have really the full relationship with the CPGs and the advertisers, so that it's really built for purpose for AD USA and our go-to-market strategy, because we have a unique strategy, right? With 5 great local brands. We're not cookie cutter, and we're not looking for everything to just be cookie cutter either.
I actually wanted to talk a little bit about the brands so that the audience knows. Some of the listeners are not on the East Coast and may not even be in the US, and so they may not know Giant and Food Lion. But before we even get into what those brands are, the Peapod, the build out or the acquisition of that was formative in getting e-commerce. But then you invested in Fresh Direct, and that sort of put you on the map for delivery on the East Coast. And now you have this process that happened after the pandemic ended, where you basically migrated those brands into what are the known brands or the retail banners: Stop and Shop, Food Lion, Giant, Hannaford. So now you've gone through this process of taking all of these sort of startup brands and merging them into the brands that are the neighborhood grocery store. So what was that all about? And tell us, like, what are the challenges there?
Well, I mean, if you know the real history, I mean, Peapod.com they were the first kind of leading grocery delivery, right? They were doing it before anybody else. And that there was an acquisition made by Ahold USA. This was even before the Ahold Delhaize merger, to pick up Peapod.com as part of the business. And so that was a bit of I'll call it a pet project off to the side or whatever, but like it never got the focus because e-commerce was in grocery quite small, quite honestly, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
especially in the early 2000s. So it was a little bit of, I think, the leadership team at the time with Ahold USA specifically seeing, the vision for the future that this is going to be something. Let's get someone that knows this space pretty well so that we can be set up for the future. But it was just such a slow burn. I mean, consumers just weren't migrating in grocery like they were in other retail sectors. But in 2016, 2017, Amazon fired some shots, right? They went out and they acquired Whole Foods and they were like, no, this grocery e-com business is going to be something we're going to take seriously. And oh, by the way, all the while we had taken the Peapod.com brand and we had expanded that across the East Coast, across Stop and Shop, Giant Food, and Giant Company. So that was actually Peapod.com branding on the East Coast as an e-com delivery service. Even though the customer was a Stop and Shop customer, all the delivery and e-com stuff was done through the Stop and Shop, or excuse me, the Peapod.com branding. But again, as I said, if I go back, then Amazon fired some shots, and we were like, okay, wait, we really need to get even more serious about this e-com play, and that's when we stood up in Chicago an e-com center of excellence. So we stood up additional product resources, and IT infrastructure resources, the digital merchandising team, digital marketing team, like AD USA. Again, post merger, this was an area where we went all in. And so we stood up Peapod Digital Labs in Chicago, building off of that Peapod.com heritage. And then we, at that point in time, made the decision shortly thereafter to do the Fresh Direct acquisition. At the same time, we had made the decision to modernize the Peapod.com technology stack, but also rebrand the e-com delivery and click and collect services on the East Coast to the actual Great Local brand. So the Peapod.com naming and branding went away and it moved to Giant Direct and Stop and Shop and those brands. And that was intentional because that was fit our strategy of becoming an omnichannel retailer. So if you think about it, like it was one of the challenges in a pure play business is like you don't have a store that, that's generating, has a different margin profile than, e-com delivery, which is typically a very unprofitable business, or at very minimum, very low margin business. Which grocery in general is low margin.
By the way, grocery is low margin. So it's funny, a grocery guy calling, e-com delivery even a worse margin business than grocery. Yeah. I didn't think that was true. I didn't think it was possible, honestly.
It is bizarre, Todd, but it if you think about it, the grocery industry works on, like you said, anywhere from 2 to 4 cents, right, on every dollar. That's kind of
right. It's a super. I just as an aside, I grew up in upstate New York in the hometown of Wegmans. And I literally, the Nicole and Colleen Wegman, the current generation running Wegmans, went to high school, and we grew up in the same town, went to high school together. Like we worked at a pizza shop together. Yeah. So it's funny because we all worked at Wegmans at one time or other. And the first day, they always say, look, our margins are like 1 to 3%. Yes. So that's, to your point about the 2 to 4%. I've heard that story, directly before.
And it's true. And all grocery retailers spent decades trying to take cost out of the system, right? Like you're looking for operational efficiencies and everything you can. To make the shopping pattern inside of your stores as efficient as possible. Self-checkouts became the thing, right? Because that also created efficiencies. Right. But then consumer demand said, no, I want you to pick it up for me. I want you to deliver it to me. I want all these things. And so then that, as you can imagine, put a ton of cost back in the system and back on that model specifically.
Right.
And so that's, again, but we knew to make e-com work, it needed to be an omni-channel business, because we know for sure, definitively, when a consumer shops with you both in store and online, they're more loyal, their basket's bigger. They're just the customer that you really want to try to tackle or go after. And so again, that was the whole purpose of kind of rebranding and building out that model on the East Coast. Fresh Direct had its own place of being a pure play. And I think, as we think about what the Fresh Direct offering was at the time, very quality focused, meal solutions focused, it helped fill some voids with us in that New York metro market as well. which, as you know, is a very difficult market to deliver groceries in, just due to the density and the high rises and everything. But again, they helped fill a void for us at that point in time.
Yeah, it's funny. I grew up on the East Coast too, so I was a King Cullen shopper.
Yeah.
That was another one that you guys acquired. So you really are kind of everywhere. But it was interesting when we were talking at grocery shop because I was kind of like, my wife is not super psyched about the idea of giant direct versus fresh direct, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. But when we talked about it, you said, that those brands are positioned differently for the
Yeah.
different loyalty segments, and
Yes.
so I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, and just to clarify, like we talked to the King Cullen folks at one point, but we never went through with that.
Oh, you didn't do
No, we
okay.
never
Yeah,
went through it.
I remember that was some
It
news. Maybe
was,
I was
it
excited
was,
about it.
yeah.
Yeah.
We
Okay.
were, that was. I don't know all the details behind that one. Won't dare speculate or speak to it, but it was definitely on the table at one point. Never came to fruition. But you still bring
When
up
you own a geography, that's a big deal, right?
it
So
is, and Tom, you're spot on, and it's why we have kept our great local brand strategy, right? Like we could have easily homogenized everything and went to a mono brand, and that just wouldn't have worked. I mean, Hannaford has a different price positioning and marketing and just go to market plan altogether than a Food Lion, than a Giant Company, than a Stop and Shop, and
Right.
so. And they're very connected to the communities in which they support and serve, and so for us, it's important we don't lose that. We don't lose that heritage. We don't lose that local connection. And then yet at the same time, we want to leverage the scale, especially across the retail media network and across e-commerce capabilities. And so we do leverage a model of, how do we leverage full scale of Ahold Delhaize USA and bring technology and capabilities at scale and yet allow our great local brands to go to market in a very uniquely positioned way.
well, specifically leveraging, Ahold Delhaize USA, you guys are now actually leveraging your European assets,
Mm-hmm.
and so you're, in my mind, you're the intercontinental champion now. You're moving into the world that Amazon and Walmart have done, which is you are bringing in your own ad server and bringing your ad tech in house, but you're crossing the pond,
Yeah.
and there's not too many. I just heard some news today that Carrefour is pulling out of certain geographies like Italy and others, and that the acquisition that Ahold Delhaize has done in Romania is doing well. So,
Perfect.
how are you able to straddle the Atlantic Ocean so well?
Yeah, so I mean, I think again, though, I mean, we've got a model in the U.S. where we allow 5 great local brands to go to market uniquely, right? So in the Netherlands, Albert Heijn goes to market, in a unique way relative to Delhaize in Belgium, relative to Alpha Beta in Greece, and as you mentioned, Profi as well in Romania. So like for us, it's how do we again use this model of build it once and leverage it multiple times. While even though the go-to-market positioning may be different, the need states in those regions or geography may be slightly different. The technology, specifically in retail media, the ad tech is quite honestly very similar, and in most cases the same. Now we have different requirements as we were looking at the advertising technology edge, as we call it in the U.S., to stand up. When we looked at things like sponsored product ads and measurement and things like, we had to add some things to the platform to meet US standards and what our advertisers in the US were looking for. But guess what, my European counterparts benefit from that because now they have a head start on the European market because they're drafting off of the US expectations and the US roadmap, if you will, from a capability set. But we're leveraging the same code base across Europe and the US, using US servers for the US and European servers for Europe, but it's the same code base, and we're sharing a product roadmap now where when we think about advertising technology, it's a global roadmap. And how are we leading the industry as a global organization in advertising technology and retail media networks as well?
What were some of the features, and decisions that went into acquiring and now owning and running your own ad platform? Just as a background, I built a large DSP that got sold ultimately to Outbrain, now known as Teads. And so as someone who's built, right, I know that when you mentioned 16, 70 people, I've run that org before.
Yeah.
And sort of owned that and owned the joys and pain of building and running ad tech. And that it is a non-trivial task, as I think you guys are well aware. And walk us through the decision to feel like you had to own something in terms of the what you guys wanted out and wanted to build out from a retail media standpoint, because I think that's an interesting discussion. And I think that the fact you said it, like, if you're not willing to sign up to own and manage 60 to 70 people, that is not something people should ever be thinking
Yeah.
about doing. It's a non-trivial thing, but there's a certain scale where maybe it makes sense,
Yeah.
to maybe your point. So it'd be kind of interesting to walk through that and what you guys see, what drove that decision, what you now see in terms of running it, and the benefits of it from your standpoint.
Yeah, I think so. I think first and foremost with me, one of the things I'm challenging my team constantly on, Todd, is relevancy, right? This just running an ad for the sake of running an ad is not doing anybody any good. It's not paying out for the
Yep.
advertiser. And ultimately, as a retailer, what we want to do is drive more loyalty with our consumers. We want to sell more groceries at the end of the day, right?
Yep.
And so when we think about retail media, it's all in service of how are we moving sales and volume and growing market share. And the technology that powers that has to be centered around delivering the most relevant items through those ads, whether that's sponsored product ads, a display ad, or in-store digital screens. Doesn't matter. It's all about driving relevant, engaging content to our customers. And so as we were looking at owning the technology and building the technology, we felt and still believe that if we built it using our data science, using our algorithms that are built specifically around groceries, purchase frequency in groceries very different than the purchase frequency around electronics or
Yep.
any other retail sector. Quite honestly, grocery just is so fast. It is like people are coming back 2, 3, 4 times in a single week.
Yep.
And so that in itself led us to believe that we could build a better algorithm and a better ad server related to sponsored product ads specifically, that's kind of built by grocers for grocery to be able to really deliver highly relevant campaigns. So that was one reason. And so that's the reason why we've been kind of touting that in the industry. The other thing is that when I look at, and this is not a slam to anybody that we've worked with in the past, but they have many masters to serve. They have many retailers they're working with. And so when it comes to prioritizing the roadmap, they got to think about a lot of people, and they have limited resources just like everybody else.
Yep.
And so we just found that we weren't moving at the pace we wanted to move on the things that were important to us. Things like agentic tools, things like leveraging AI to help automate workflows. And so for us, it was like, well, we want to build out these things and we can do it faster ourselves is the way we believe. The other thing is the data that sits behind all of that. In an AI world, especially a generative AI world or an agentic AI world, we're pretty guarded around where we put our data. And so building that in-house allows us to keep our data behind our four walls and gated, if you will, a bit, but still leverage those incredible capabilities around agentic tools and things like that.
Well, I think it's important, and I hear you on the data side, right? Having run a DSP and the challenges of pulling in and pushing out data and how you guard data and clean rooms and all that. It is a pain in the behind. And I think that, you look at people talk about data, and the company that probably guards it more than anyone else in the world is Amazon. And part of the reason they acquired their ad tech and brought it in house. Like Seismic is the company they acquired that's now powering Amazon's DSP. And I think it's kind of the same thing, whereas data is so valuable and important. And I think you brought up another interesting point. If you have a data science team and an advanced data science team, to your point about the ability to look at records dynamically and be able to build out sort of the data models, I think that's a precursor.
Yeah.
Right? In terms of, if you don't have a sophisticated data organization, team structure, the ability, then standing up your ad tech is probably impossible.
Agreed.
Right in the DSP that I ran, I had a data science team in terms of bid logic and user logic, and we had the challenge of how do you incorporate hundreds, if not thousands of different data sets for advertisers. And I think what's interesting as well for you all is obviously I had not heard of Ahold Delhaize until I started working with Tom, but I'd heard of your local brands. I went to college in North Carolina, so I'm very familiar with Food Lion. My wife's from there, so my in-laws live there, and so I've shopped at Food Lion many, many times. And would not have necessarily known that, but when you start piecing together the pieces, and then you bring in the European operations, you guys do have a certain global scale that lends itself to your point of like, yeah, Todd, we can invest in 60 to 70 people on the ad tech infrastructure side. In addition, just like dunnhumby, Kroger bought dunnhumby America to build out their own data science. We have a data science team powering these businesses anyways, so we have sort of that DNA to pull off what you're pulling off. And I think that's kind of an important aspect, which is it is non-trivial to own and run your own ad stack, but it can have benefits if you have a certain size and scale. What are some of the interesting, besides relevancy and the ability maybe to do better targeting with your own data set within your own understood shopping lifecycle or conversion lifecycle? What are some of the other features that you feel are unique
Yeah.
to the Edge offering, which is what you guys call the U.S. retail media platform?
Yeah.
As a product guy, right? I'm always curious, like
Yeah.
what features were the ones that you were really begging for and wanting to build out and never could get to until you
Yeah.
owned it. So love to hear what you guys think about from a product differentiation standpoint in terms of features of the Edge platform to power your retail media network.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Good news is it'll be at parity with what you would expect elsewhere. First and foremost, that was important to me, Todd. So like we have to be at parity with things like incrementality and all those pieces of measurement, which is great. Okay, so check the box. We're able to do that. Where we believe it gives us a point of differentiation and where we're really excited about the future is where I talked about this concept of a one-stop ad shop. So Edge is only the beginning. So we're launching on January 5th with Edge being the power, the ad tech, if you will, that's going to power sponsored product ads, our on-site display offering, as well as our in-store digital screen network. At the same time, the roadmap already for 26 is set where we're bringing in other capabilities and other channels, because what we want to build is an agentic layer that sits on the top of a multi-channel platform where you integrate with DSPs, you can integrate with social platforms, the networks, and then you'd have an agent sitting on top that allows your media planning or a media buyer to come to that platform and say, I have this budget, I have these products, and I have this objective and goal. What's the most efficient and effective way for me to activate that campaign? So sitting on top of Edge, if you will, is what we're calling the one-stop ad shop that then allows you to do a multi-channel media buy and then optimize that media buy in real time and then get multi-touch attribution measurement on the tail end of that. So not just single channel attribution measurement, but really looking across an omni-channel plan. I don't know how you see the world, but the way I see the world with my team is in media planning and in just channel orchestration. That's where I have a biggest opportunity, because folks have grown up in the industry as a sponsored search expert, or they worked in offsite, at an agency, or those are the channels that they really know and they're really good at. You ask them to sit down and build an omni-channel plan, look across multiple channels and put together a proposal for our advertising partners that are going to help them reach consumers across the full funnel. And it's like, that's a lot to take on. Not that it can't be done and not that we're doing some of it manually, but it's not the ideal way to do it. And so in this world that we live in now, where we have some really cool tools ahead of us, and these aren't futuristic, like they're here now and we can leverage them now.
Oh, for sure.
Is like putting that layer of agentic tooling on top of the Edge platform to build out that one-stop ad shop.
So one of the most interesting things that happened when we were talking at grocery shop, I was sitting with James Tenser actually, and we were saying, what would it be like if you just merged your JBPs between trade and retail media?
Yeah.
And that sort of sent off a firestorm. We're going to be talking to some other people on the podcast about that, because I heard about the Walmart history where Walmart did that, said, oh, we're just going to get rid of trade. And they lost $1 billion worth of trade funds and it was tough to bring it back. But you had an interesting response to that, which is you could potentially put two in a box, something like that. Like you could have both of the discussions, but you still have the same goals of tell us your story about where you think trade and retail media sit.
Yeah, I mean, I'll even add a third one. You got shopper budgets as well, right? So I think we're trying to shift the conversation to what we're calling as a customer engagement kind of program, or customer engagement reimagined is the way I've kind of talked about it, Tom. And to your point, we see that occurring through this two in a box approach, two in a box being a category manager and a retail media lead for that particular partner. So I don't want to alienate anybody or spotlight anybody without permission, but let's just say we take one of our top laundry suppliers and we meet with them and we're going to go through a business.
Is it still in the same tiny cubicle? Because that's two in a box is sweaty. I don't know.
No, it's not the same. We call it a meeting room maybe, but it's got to be more than that. But typically the way it starts is we'll sit down and we'll talk about annual planning, right? So we're going to sit down and build an annual plan with our partner. That's inclusive of retail media and the commercial activation, because it's like, what's in your innovation pipeline? What are the key marketing tent poles that are important to that partner? What are the programs that we're going to run at each of the great local brands individually? But what are the programs we're going to run across AD USA holistically, so that we can have a scaled offering? And then how are we amplifying those things with retail media? But to me, it starts with what's the business plan, what's the commercial activation plan, ultimately a customer engagement plan that allows us to deliver something really cool and compelling that's going to drive growth. As I said a moment ago, like our mission is to drive sales growth, volume growth, ultimately market share growth. We do that by sitting down building great plans. Now that requires trade investment. That could require some shopper marketing programs and shopper marketing investment. And then we need the retail media there to support it as well as part of the plan. The retail media plan could be simply amplifying an innovation plan that the category merchants have. It could also be the everyday always on program, because you gotta in every marketing world, right? You gotta have an always on strategy. How are you protecting, retaining consumers, but also acquiring new? And so we're working with the brand teams on that type of work as well. But for me, two in a box is us, so the merchant and the retail media team sitting together side by side, locked arms, doing business planning with our partners. And that has to happen in the annual planning process, but also in the day-to-day motions, right? Because running a grocery business isn't like you just sit down twice a year, build a plan, and you're done. Like, no, there's this always on motion of what's happening in the business. I mean, we all know, we got the government shutdown thing going on right now. We got the potential SNAP stuff looming. And so the teams are scrambling even as we speak today. Like, how are we going to help deliver additional value to consumers next week? Well, great. Well, how do we talk about that? How do we use retail media to talk about that? And that's not just, again, twice a year. That's always on type of thing.
Well, the thing that was interesting that we talked about as well, which I thought was, this honestly for me was the most exciting. When you talked about just before that it's consumer management versus category management, I was really worried that retailers were going to be sort of stuck in this situation where they want to measure every sale one-to-one, and they would be stuck with these 6-month, 2-year-old buyer or category audiences like we were, way back in the 2020s. And so it's like, I'm interested in sort of your vision of how do you get that GLP-1 shopper? And that whole story, I think, I'd love for you to tell that again.
Yeah. So, I've said this to others, it's a bit of a controversial point of view for anybody because I didn't grow up in the media world, right? I gave you my background at the beginning of the call. But for someone that's a legacy media buyer that's used to buying audiences and then activating that set audience to go out and activate media, that's the way media has been bought for decades, right? That's what people are used to doing.
Yep.
My point of view is we don't need to do that anymore. It's an antiquated way. And it's quite honestly, you're using old data to target someone's behavior that may not be relevant anymore. And I use the GLP-1 as one example, and not to say, because obviously with HIPAA laws and things, you got to be careful there. But I think just put GLP-1s aside, let's just say in general, the consumer's shopping behavior changes so quickly, whether they, got, a growing family, whether they picked up a pet. The dietary restrictions are now appearing where they all of a sudden I'm allergic to peanuts or whatever. Like, things change so quickly with consumers. And we know, based on more recent shopping behavior, as I talked about before, grocery shopping happens at a very high frequency. We can use signals to get actually predictive around what consumers may likely purchase based on the signals we know and based on of other customers and how they've behaved. And why not use that to target consumers around a propensity to buy your products versus saying, I want to target consumers based on 6-month-old. And so for me, it's like, how are we, and we're doing this, is leveraging AI technology to use propensity modeling to look for in-market shoppers, target them with offsite media, then, based on their propensity to actually buy versus, again, looking for lapsed category buyers. Not that you can't use analytics to evaluate and understand those types of things if you're looking for insights, but do that after the campaign or even in flight of the campaign. You don't need to use that as a starting point. You just narrow your reach down out of the gate for no real good reason.
Well, we were talking to Jeff Cohen over, he's at Sky now. He was at Amazon, and he was talking to us about Poppy. And he's like, you create a category on Amazon, and you can scale it out in other retailers. But they've been creating categories there. I think it's great to hear that challenger brands can be working with an Ahold Delhaize earlier on in the process, because you can be predictive. And, if a prebiotic soda doesn't exist yet, you can't use that as an audience.
That's right.
And so, yeah, I think that, to me, that's what's most exciting.
Well, even in your GLP-1 example, right? If you just use that as an example, consumers, may have been buying chips. They may have been buying cookies or snacks or all these other things. And all of a sudden in this past shopping trip, they switched over to protein yogurt and other, more healthier options. and they're not buying chips. So why would you want to market them in the chip category or market them in cookie category? You need to market them in the categories that they're now looking to lean into and shop into. So
I think it's interesting, going back to the JBP kind of discussion, which is that, you all trying to have this merged kind of global, one-stop shop media planning for whatever term, investment planning for anyone to do is um, as a guy who's new to retail media, I came from the traditional digital media side, right? I'm like, when I sat down and started working with Tom started explaining this. Well, there's the retail media plan and there's the JVP. I'm like, how are they not? They're one master. It's one budget on the other side. How is this not coordinated? And it's fascinating to me how many retailers still keep them completely separate and aren't linking them and aren't trying to do a holistic play. And maybe it's tooling, right? The lack of coordinated systems,
Yeah.
right? To your point of trying to have a holistic view from in store in
yeah,
a traditional sort of commercial JBP trade perspective to other environments like e-commerce where retail media typically is. And I agree with you. It's one journey
yeah,
and the systems are one. And the one that we haven't really dove into, which is a pet project of Tom and I, which is really pushing for more in-store retail media. And you guys know, right? Because that's a great example. In-store retail media is that trade or is
Yeah.
that retail, right? Retail media.
or
And
shop around.
honestly, right, or shopper, right? And they're really all one and the same. And it's really and we're psyched to hear the in-store media is a big part of what you're trying to do with retail media, because Tom and I view it as it is really something that should take off and really make, call it retail media V2 or V3 explode. And so it's interesting because I think that's kind of the nexus point, right? Well, if it's on the shelf, who owns that?
Yeah.
Is it the JVP team, commercial
Well,
team?
is it all
Right?
does it make sense to reshuffle the deck and just be like anything that's assigned is media, and then the actual price promotion, how much you get on the shelf in terms of the SKUs, like is
Right.
that trade versus the signage? Like,
For me, yes, I think so, Tom. But I maybe just two quick reactions to what you said, Todd. I think to just come back to your point around trade versus media versus the JVP and how I think
Right.
the biggest issue is you've got legacy organizational structures on the CPG side and on the retailer side, right? You've got a chief merchant who's done brick and mortar category management. You've got a
Yep.
marketing team that's done enterprise marketing. You've probably got a digital e-com team, probably somewhere sitting inside of a retail organization.
Yep.
And then you on the CPG side, you've got the same, and sometimes even more complexity inside of that. But and then there's trying to bring those all together. And oh, by the way, every CPG and every retailer has probably got their own unique structures. And then that creates, and then you've got legacy budgets that are sitting in run rates of particular areas. And so then you're asking people to shift dollars and move dollars around, which is never a popular conversation. I gave the example in our organization, have the chief merchant go up to the chief marketing officer and say, I need to move $1 million over into my trade investment next year. The chief marketing officer is probably going to ask a lot of questions and not just say, yeah, sure, no problem, move the $1 million, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean,
yeah.
And so but in modern retail, as I like to think about it, that's why I keep coming back to this concept of customer engagement is those things all start to converge. To your point, there's one customer journey. And your mission is to sell more products. How do you then capitalize on that journey with enterprise marketing, with retail media, with a commercial activation plan that's got trade and everything else involved? Because it is one plan, and that's one of the changes we made. I don't know if we talked about this, Tom, but we moved digital merchandising, we moved digital enterprise marketing into the retail media practice. That is my team. Like,
is that the same as like consumer insights, or because I heard that's also part of it as well?
I don't have consumer insights. I do have loyalty from an offer execution standpoint, what we're doing with the loyalty programs, but the strategy of the loyalty program sits within our great local brands. But what I see and what I see the vision for is like when, just as you described it, Todd, like there's a customer journey, right? I want to be able to map out all the customer journeys, and then I want to be able to leverage technology to tell me when and how should I engage with that consumer.
Yeah.
What channel should I use? Where do they engage? Because if I'm serving them email and they don't ever open the email, then don't spend any money sending them email. Let's send them something else. If they're engaging with offsite media, do I use enterprise marketing messaging or do I use a retail media campaign to do that? What's the most efficient way to move that consumer down that journey that we're trying to move them to? And so by bringing the teams together, we can start to have that type of conversation with the technology that we're standing up to say, okay, How do I then build out journey maps that allow me to engage with the consumer and do that through a commercial plan and do that with marketing and retail media versus siloed functions, talking to consumers, tripping over ourselves to talk to consumers and maybe even confusing consumers?
Yeah, the enterprise marketing came up in our discussion with Albertsons, and it seems like that's a new tool in the chest that that the retailers really had siloed off as well. At least when I was
Yeah.
working in that area. And so,
Yeah.
what's your perspective on that? Because I'm actually trying. I have like a lifelong journey to try to figure out how CTV fits exactly into retail media, and I feel like enterprise marketing or potentially other sorts of brand budgets and things like that are going to play a role there.
Yeah.
Where do you see all of that going? Like, because you're already talking about in-store, on-site, and off-site.
Yeah.
Do those higher funnel channels come in sooner or later?
They're already here for us. So we, as part of my retail media network, we stand behind a full funnel offering. So we offer CTV, we offer offsite display, we offer OLV. We're partnering with folks like Chicory on recipe sites and things, and that is all in service of hitting that upper funnel awareness into consideration type area. And then we have lower funnel tactics that we use every day, as you can imagine, on-site display, sponsored product ads. But for our retail media network, we're already offering CTV, and we're talking to some folks about a pretty cool partnership coming up that we'll be able to share. And then also we offer the typical social media stuff as well, which I would put kind of in that upper media area as well with TikTok and Meta and Insta and those folks. I think they're not necessarily. I mean, there's some of those you could argue are shoppable, and so that becomes a little more closer to lower funnel. But for me, as I see it, Tom, like it's already there. Like it's not coming; it's there. I think to Todd's earlier question and point is where the next wave is really getting in store. I believe firmly in store as well. We've got a digital screen expansion that we're underway doing. We have
Awesome.
we worked with last year. We put out we partnered with Inmar to do our digital coupon business, but we also partnered with Inmar to do our in-store print program. So the shelf blades and floor stickers.
Yep.
That wasn't just, hey, happenstance. Let's just we did that intentionally because we want to be able to connect the analog experience in the store to the digital experience. And that's a small way of building out what I'm calling is the connected store, because to me, the connected store is about how do you digitize the shopping experience in the store. And that goes, how are we using signage in store from analog and digital? How are we using our native mobile app to create engagements with the consumer, whether that's wayfinding, surprising, delighting with personalized offer at shelf, using ESLs at shelf to, as a but there's ways. I mean, like to me, like those are the things that from the next wave of retail media is how you digitize the store and connect the digital and brick and mortar experience.
How many stores will have, and maybe this isn't publicly available yet, but as you look at 2026, what percentage of your stores do you expect to have digital signage in?
It's not public knowledge, but let's just ballpark it with over half.
Oh, great.
Oh, that's aggressive. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. No, we'll be
excited about that in our.
Oh, we're super excited about that. That's awesome. No, half is aggressive because, we talked, with the marketer and we've talked with others and and Kroger is rolling out, 2 stores right now, like 2 test stores.
We've got 15 now. And it's funny you bring this up because I was at Cannes. I was talking with Sean Chaney at the time, and he was with Vistar at the time, but he asked the question to a group of us and said, is 2025 the year of digital screens in store? And I was like, no, I think 2025 will be the year of folks, establishing proof of concepts. Right. And that's what 2025 has kind of become. And I think 26 will be folks will evaluate the proof of concepts, and there'll be those that move faster. And I think you'll see folks that'll go, I'll be honest, Hy-Vee, they went out and did, 10,000 screens. I think they announced. Like, I think that's aggressive.
Right.
I think that's aggressive.
Yeah. I was saying to Sarah, I was like, you need to go to the Midwest. That's where all the screens are.
And maybe that's right. I don't know if that's right or wrong, but I think for me, it's like, I would rather personally go out with a few screens per store and then make sure that demand is there, make sure consumer engagement and response is there, and then think about where else in the store can I digitize the experience besides just putting up a 70-inch monitor someplace else in the store.
Right.
Well, that's the other thing in terms of like, what is the creative experience for in-store
content?
And I'm really interested in who are those brands that are really like taking the lead in doing this, but is it a Vusion, strip ESL strip on the shelf versus, like you said, a 70-inch TV screen, because it depends. What are you trying to put up there? Are you trying to put what would normally be like a web banner, or are you trying to put, an influencer up there? Or are you trying to put a 6-second or 15-second ad? Like, what are
You
trying
bring
to
up
do?
a fantastic point, because one of the things we continue to talk about, and even with all my chief marketing officers, when I work with 5 of them, it always comes back to what's the store experience, what's the content strategy. The screen and the location of the screen, like we can pick the right spots. Data will tell us where the right places are based on, how long someone dwells in a particular area, things like that. But really it boils down to, as you said, like, what is the experience you're trying to create in the store? And then what is the use case of that component in that particular experience, whether that's in aisle, whether that's perimeter, or some fresh department, wherever.
To me, I hope that's what we figure out in 26. But
well, part of it to me is, as a longtime digital media guy, is there's going to be a ton of innovation in store. It is really the new landscape. It's like building web ads 20 years ago, right? We didn't have standards. We didn't know what banners should look like. Interactivity didn't exist. Video didn't exist. All these things didn't exist. And that's kind of a fun stage when you get to invent stuff. And so that's really going to be, to Tom's point, like, he's geeked out on some of these formats and things like that. And from, my point of view is, and we've talked about this before, which is in store is a unique landscape that's very different from the walled gardens and really gives retailers a huge opportunity to develop in a way the walled gardens can't touch. 2, in terms of time spent in store has not gone down, right? Yes, e-commerce has grown, but in-store time has remained the same, and maybe even increased a little as people seek in real life experiences. And so we talk about this, like we used to talk about digital not capturing its fair share of time spent in terms of media dollars, right? Digital gone to 50-50 in terms of media impressions, but dollars didn't get to that point.
Well, here's something else I'd offer too, Todd, is like and I guarantee you every retailer is on this journey. I don't know this definitively. You guys might know for sure, but fresh and growing your fresh departments and meal solutions and like center store is shrinking in general, right?
Right.
And so for those CPG brands, they have to think about how are they going to connect with consumers inside of the brick and mortar walls, because those physical pallet drops and things that used to be at plenty in a store, they're not as plentiful as they used to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You got
it's a ton of innovation changing. And so our point is like, how is retail going to capture? And so right now people say, retail media only kept outside of the Amazon and Walmart's only 15% goes to the rest of everyone else. And I'm like, yeah, but that 15% is going to grow like the dickens, especially as in-store takes off, because the amount of time the amount of time spent, just dollars will flow to where people's eyeballs are. Yeah. And as you build out these capabilities, and again, Tom and you talking about how there's going to be a whole bunch of interesting experimentation, innovation coming here. And so the orchestration, kind of the back-end infrastructures, the wire and plumbing's available, that right, you can push ads to whatever screen you want to. Honestly, that's not the hard part. The hard part is kind of what you guys are talking about, the orchestration, what does it look like, the planning. But anyway, we're super excited about 26, 27, 28 in terms as we go from 2 to 15 stores to half. Like, it just
can't turn into Times Square. No offense to Times Square, but you can't turn the store into like it's just an ad, bunch of ads popping. Like you have to create theater, you have to create experience, and it has to be something that's really engaging for the consumer overall, not just one-off screen here, screen there.
Yeah, as long as it's something that helps you understand what to buy better, I'm all for it. And it doesn't need to be a million different screens. And, if it has to be that it's very coveted to be able to bid up and win that space or partner to get to that space in the JBP, then all the better for you, right?
Yeah. And even better if it ties to something that's actually going on in the store from a commercial standpoint, in my opinion.
Right? Agreed.
So if the merchants have a program,
integrated media planning is going to be awesome.
I agree. Yeah.
Cool. Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I hope we get to do it again sometime, but we are at time. So thank you so much for joining us on The Middleman.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.